We're good to go. That's good. Okay, I'm on time, and now we have the next session. And I love to speak about encryption and regulations and encryption and what is possible and encryption in cloud and out of the cloud. So that's very good. And thank you for the invitation. And thank you that I'm here and talking about encryption in the cloud and out of the cloud, because this topic is one of the mainly topics in the last 3 or 4 years. I'm talking with customers, and I'm also talking with a lot of MVPs and talking with other region directors and with Microsoft and AWS and Alibaba Cloud and all of these ones. I'm talking about encryption and encryption in the combination of encryption and regulations and encryption and do we need it, why we need it, and where is encryption in the cloud? So let's start a little bit with this track. If you want to learn more about encryption, not in the deep technical view, we are talking about regulations and all of this. So the next session out of me is also about compliance after the session. So you can stay here and hear more and more about new and great things and great tools. So let's talk a little bit about encryption. I'm prepared. I have my pen here, so maybe we can paint a little bit and drawing at. Let's start and encryption in and out of the cloud. Okay, let's start a little bit. What are the learning objects in this session? We want to talk about encryption. Yes, we want to talk about modern work and encryption, and there are some cool Ignite news we can talk about. And also we talk about encryption in Microsoft 365 and Office 365. Yes, there's something about PureView. We will have a view about the scheme and also about encryption, all of this in this round. And also, we want to talk about encryption in Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, Alibaba, and all of this. And also we talk about hold your own key, bring your own key, double key encryption, and also about create your own key. So there are some interesting scenarios outside or inside and outside of the cloud we can talk about. And yes, a little bit. And I know we're in India, but I think we have to talk a little bit about GDPR. And I know some India customers and also my company BDO has offices in India, and I have talks with my colleagues about encryption and how we have to, why we need encryption in combination with GDPR. So there's the data privacy regulations here in Europe. So that you know, okay, where's Raphael come from? Yeah, I'm sitting in Europe and near Cologne, like Marcel, and you see in my background, this is Cologne. So we are in the not really in the morning, 10:30 now, Germany, but yeah, it's the right time to talk about encryption from Germany. And if you have seen on Ignite a lot of talks from Microsoft, Germany is also the example for encryption and regulations in the USA, and also in a lot of sessions I saw also in India and also in APAC, in Asia, and in Australia and all of this. So let's go a little bit forward. How we learn more about these objects. I created a short agenda. We have a short introduction. And a short introduction where you can be also a part of it, and you have to think about your company and your daily doing, and also why we need encryption, yes, and how it works and how we can have, and we talk about bring your own key, hold your own key, double key encryption, all of this, and we have talk a little bit about best practices, and we have the chance to have some questions. So let's start, and let's start about talking about encryption. Okay. If I talk about encryption, I think at the first time for me, and I'm looking on this topic as as a guy who's learning and working a lot with regulations and laws. So the first thing is law and regulations. Yes, we need encryption, and also we need encryption for data privacy. I need encryption, and I'm using encryption. When I use email, my emails are always encrypted, for example, or mostly encrypted. And I'm working also on devices which are encrypted, and most of the encryption, most of the people don't know instead of they are talking in the press or in social media networks about it, for example about WhatsApp or other messenger, for example also Signal, Streamer and all of this. There are a lot of discussion here in Europe about encryption, and I know there are also the same discussion in India and in your local community about encryption. I know, I think of it. And yeah, regulations, data protection, protection of secrets. Yes, protection of secret, and we all have protection of all have secrets, and all we have communications, and we will talk about it. And one of the great examples is, for example, and I talked about WhatsApp and these messengers, is Signal. And Signal has using Azure Confidential Computing. What it is, and we talk a little bit later, and we also talked about a little bit later about how, for example, US offices or FBI and CIA and all of this has access to data, and do they have access to the keys too? About the Cloud Act, for example, that's also some interesting things. So we have also a huge discussion here in Germany about how our police, for example, get the encryption keys or get the keys to decrypt messages, to decrypt emails, decrypt data, or if they don't get only the encrypted data. So we have a lot of talks about law, regulations, and also how we use it and how we use it in the daily work. So for you, and this is the first thing, please think a little bit about it. Think about encryption in your daily life, encryption in your company. For example, the first question is always, do you label your data? Do you label your data in your company? Every data, unstructured data, structured data. For example, also, do you classify your data? Do you encrypt your data? When you when you're working, for example, on draft of contracts, do you encrypt and classify your data? What happened, for example, when it's not encrypted and it's on a USB stick and you lose your USB stick and everyone can see the data and all of these? So there are some great examples that hopefully don't happen. There's an example here out of Germany. We have a jail, and in the jail there are working a lot of employees, and there was an Excel file where all the addresses of the people are stored, and the Excel file was on a USB stick. And some of these employees who bring the USB stick out of the office and walking to his car and lose his USB stick, and some of the people who have to be in the jail found this USB stick and take the USB with him and have a look on it and see the unencrypted Excel file, unencrypted USB stick, and see all the addresses of the employees of the jail. So the following of this mistake was everyone has to move to another house, to another address, has to move to another city of these employees. So that's one of the typical, that's one of the examples we have here in Europe, and that's the same for you. It's also a little example that you have secret data, and the secret data can be also your address in a context of if you're an employee or of a jail, or if you're employee at the police or whatever. So that's very, very interesting. And if we go back to your company or to my company, we have to use encryption, and we need to use encryption because we are working with lawyers, for example. We are working a lot of with testing and using assessments with our customers and talking about their details and talking about their intellectual property, talking about their development, and that's very, very interesting. That then often we ask, okay, is your data encrypted? Is your Power BI sheet encrypted and classified? So think a little bit about you. And there's also a very interesting thing when you talk about encryption. We all talk when we start with cloud computing and also with Microsoft 365. We are talking about adoption. And yes, adoption and encryption is also a topic which comes together, because the people, if you don't have auto labeling, all of this, or if you have auto labeling too, the people need to be classified the data and need to work with encrypted files too, because encrypted files has some restrictions in the daily work. So that's also a very good thing that, for example, we make conferences for our employees. We make conferences for our customers. I also have a conference like you next year in February about compliance and governance and encryption and all of these. And that's the only thing. You have to talk with your customers. You have to talk with your employees. Please label, please classify, please encrypt your data, please encrypt your files, and put it with auto labeling, with Defender for Cloud App, and also with Trainable Classifier and all of this in the modern workplace. And also in cloud, when you have your SQL Server as a service or whatever, please think about encryption. And yes, now when you use SQL Server, and yes, you encrypt your databases, it's slower in your application. Yes, I know, but encryption is very important. So think about it, maybe to use some more SQL servers in a farm, or think about other performance, performance to make your performance a little bit higher with other things. But encryption is very, very important. Okay. Next one, and I talked a lot about it, to don't switch the slide, but all fine. That's also an issue when you talk about encryption and encryption in your daily life. You have a lot of data, and you have a lot of data stored in the different storages, in different drives, in different platforms. And more, and if you have a look at your daily work, you're using also different apps, different applications, and also you see in the pre-session from Marcel, you are using also a community tools, community applications. You are using scripts. You have to store scripts, for example, in GitHub and in your OneDrive and whatever. For example, also in Azure DevOps, for example, and also on the file level, you have files. For example, in your Exchange mailbox, you have files. Maybe with Power Automate directly all attachments to your OneDrive. Then you have files in your OneDrive. You have structured data in your SQL Server databases, and you're using, for example, also short messaging services. You're using Facebook, Twitter, and all of these social networks and all of this. You're working in different tenants. You're working in different Azure environments. You are working in different clouds. So for me, it's typical that we have a multi-cloud environment. So you have to think about encryption and how you can work with encrypted files together. And also when you write your builds, I have a customer for myself. I have to send or I have to upload unencrypted files or unencrypted builds and invoices because they can't work with encryption and they can't work with encrypted files. So you have also limits in your daily work when you work with encryption. And for me, and this is one of my favorite slides of modern workplace. You work today not only internal. You don't work on the same server, on the same NAS system. You're working in the cloud. You're working with Office 365, with Google Cloud. You're working with own cloud. You're working with your own cloud environment, with your own cloud applications, and you don't working only internal. You're working also with external partners. You're working with the community like this, and all of this you're working together, and you have to deliverables at the end, or you have results at the end of your work, and all of the process and all of these need to be protected. Then you have to work together in encrypted files. And this is one of the Ignite announcements I love so much. And I started in the introduction with this because I love it so much. It's the possibility today, if you're working with Microsoft Information Protection, you can work together on encrypted files. So that is the news, and that's the news I love, and I love so hard, and I love so much, because before it's not possible. Before only one person can work, or you have to download the file and upload the file and all of these old ones to working together. And everyone's like, okay, no, I'm working together since BPOS or since the last 5 years with Office 365, with Google Cloud and all of this. And yes, but it was always unencrypted files. So the files are not encrypted. But when you work with encrypted on sensitive or higher sensitive level, now it's possible to work together. But one hint on this topic, if you work together in encrypted files with Microsoft Information Protection, yes, it's possible with internal and external, but you need the default key. And yes, I think we go a little bit forward, and then we talk a little bit more about the work together with encrypted files, but you have to learn a little bit more about encryption. Okay, that's a little bit of longer introduction, but one more you need to know, and I hope you know this slide. I have this slide every time, and I shared it also with Microsoft guys. The cloud provider can be also another cloud provider, but and this option is Microsoft. And you see we have also a model of shared responsibility. So we go a little bit back from the modern work topic back to cloud, typical cloud and typical working with your local. Oh, that is German. We need to see. Okay, with local and also from your local server environment to your cloud environment, and you have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And yes, I don't need to explain it here. Hopefully, every one of you knows it. And it's very interesting. And if you have a look at this cloud, where are the responsibilities? Who need to be care of it? And if you have a look here, you see, for example, on premises, that's you or that's me. When I host my own server in my own data center, I'm responsible for all of the typical topics here, like physical infrastructure, host infrastructure, network controls, application level control, identity and access management, client and endpoint safety, and data classification and responsibility. And also, yes, encryption. Encryption, for example, for using, for example, BitLocker on your drives, and also to TLS, and also to, for example, S-MIME or PGP encryption for your emails. So yes, that's responsible for you. And when you go into the cloud, and I opened one more, you have a shared responsible model. So for something, Microsoft need to be care of it. And that's the first thing you have to, the next thing you have to learn in my session. Yes, there's Microsoft, and Microsoft is responsible for it, and there are you responsible for it. And that's also explained. For example, I got often the question, okay, Raphael, I want to bring my own keys to BitLocker in Office 365. And on this graphic, you can answer if it's possible or not. What do you think? Okay, 1, 2, 3. When you think of it, can it possible to bring your own keys to BitLocker in Office 365? You have a look. Okay, go in this line to the blue button. Okay, this Microsoft. So no, Microsoft brings you, for example, SharePoint with you, and you can't bring your own key or your own key to BitLocker to Microsoft in Microsoft data centers. No, that's not possible. That's possible on infrastructure as a service, or you're using, for example, Azure storages. Is it possible to bring your BitLocker there? No, but you can have other options. You can bring your own BitLocker key for your own server or for your own devices. That's also possible. But that's a little bit of example when you have these shared model of shared responsibility, where you can bring your keys, or you have your option of bring your own key, hold your own key, create your own key. We will talk a little bit later, and I have a table of it in a comparing slide. But this is also very interesting. So, talking a little bit about regulations, and then a deep dive to encryption and comparing encryption in clouds and out of the cloud. Okay, I talk a little bit about standards and regulations and reasons. Often, and when we think about, for example, in Europe, and also I know some of Australia, and also in India, we have some decisions of the court that, for example, some special information need to be protected, company sensitive information need to be protected. In Germany, we have a new law, or in Europe, it's a European one. We have a new law that we have to encrypt sensitive information. We have to encrypt emails with sensitive information also out of the data privacy view. And so we have some regulations. We need to use encryption, and we have also some standards like ISO standards and SOC standards, and all of this. We have a look into the next slide. And also, we have some issues, or we have some challenges, for example, to beware from access from other countries or from other authorities. And then we need also encryption, and that's the discussion in Germany that US authorities like FBI or CIA have access to our customer data, and then we need encryption and to make it a little bit to protect the data. Protect the data with encryption, and that's another topic on the technical level. But also interesting. All of our regulation authorities said, okay, encryption and hold your own key encryption, for example, is the best one, and bring your own key is also a valid method to protect against the access of other countries and access of other authorities of other countries. And then I read 3 weeks ago, a new article from MIT. And they said, okay, in combination with quantum computing, it's possible today to decrypt the most of the keys in 8 hours. No, not 8 years, not 8 months, not 8 weeks, but in 8 hours. So that's also a little bit we have to talk. We can think about it. Do we need in hold your own key scenario? Is it really the best one with all of the restrictions and all of the challenges you have to need to fulfill the regulations? But on the other side, it's only if you have an hold your own key scenario, it's only a thing that you win 8 hours. To be protected, to be more protected for your files. So sometimes you can say, okay, for these 8 hours, we don't need to hold your own key scenario. We can live with a standard key. That's also a risk decision of the executive board. And I see some insurance that said, okay, that's not possible. We use this default key. We protect against every third people, but we don't protect about the secret authorities or the authorities like NSA or CIA. Or all of this. Okay, go a little bit forward, and you see here we have some international standards, we have industry standards, and we have regional standards. And yes, there's an old one, and I love it to in every of my session I have this slide. I love to delete it, or I love to no. And this is on PowerPoint. It's totally crazy. So EU Privacy Shield is not available anymore, but the other ones are available. And you see there are a lot of standards and regulations where encryption are a part of it. For example, we're thinking about TSAX is a tool set or a framework for car builder, and if you have also a look at SOC, and as told we use SOC. I hope I can put it here. Yeah. About SOC certifications, for example, there's also a encryption part of it. And also when you go to Germany and you have here the C5 framework and IT security law and all of this is also a part of encryption, or is also there's a part of encryption in it. So, and when you have a look worldwide, and I hope, and that's a little bit of you see also India here. And have a look a little bit about about the standards here in India. I found some. It's also the ISO certificates, and also Mighty. I Google it and I have a look for it. There are also encryption parts in this regulation, in these standards. So you have the same situation like up in Germany, that you have to fulfill. Also, data center provider, for example, you have to fulfill some encryption defaults and encryption standards. And I'm very happy if you have a look at the companies a little bit worldwide. And you see that these companies, or the head office of the companies, Google Cloud, AWS, Salesforce, Telekom, that's one from Germany, also SAP, and SAP, I know you know, this is also a company from Germany, and we have Alibaba, and we have also Azure. You see that they have to fulfill the regulations worldwide. But yeah, at the data privacy discussion, we have the discussion and also discussion of secret data, that these provider don't have access to the files and to the data. We need encryption, or we need architecture solutions like Azure Confidential Computing, that the provider, or that the host and the provider don't have access, and also all of the national authorities don't have access. Only the people they talk with each other have access. And this is a good example. And I talked about the example Signal. And Signal is one of the examples. Signal is using Azure Confidential Computing. Signal is also the first customer use case for Azure Confidential Computing. I have also two customers. They're using now Azure Confidential Computing together with intelligent infrastructure for big data. My customer using this with big data analytics for high sensitive data, for health data, e-health, and all of this. And the customer case here for Azure Confidential Computing is Signal. And it is very interesting that three decisions now. Yeah, 3 or 4 decisions now. I think the fourth decision of a court in New York I read yesterday night. They said, okay, go to Signal, and said, okay, we need your files, we need your data, we need the customer data in your service out of Signal. And Signal says, okay, we have a look. No, we don't have access to the customer data. We can't give you the customer data. We use Azure Confidential Computing. We are using a system of encryption keys and architecture that we host the service, but we don't have access to the data. So we have a shift and a mindset shift of, for example, on-premise. We have access to our data. We can go to the drive, take the drive, and say, okay, here are our data, to a cloud version with Azure Confidential Computing, with architecture that no one has access to the data. And yes, that's a huge discussion also here in Germany, and I think it's also a discussion for you that we talked about, and we have to talk about what happened when some bad guys using this new technology, when using this infrastructure to plan bad things or to plan terroristic attacks and all of this. And yes, also the regulation and also the authority talking about it and creating new laws or extend the laws we have, also international, that they said, okay, in some typical use cases, we need access, or we need access to the drive at the end, for example, where the message is stored. So, for example, for Signal, sometimes we are thinking and are also looking at Reddit and all of this. If the national authorities has access, for example, to the message is stored at the end on the device. That's an interesting topic. If someone knows any more, please share it with me. That's very interesting how, for example, authorities have access at the end. For Signal, I don't know. I think no. I have talked with some guys from Signal on Ignite. And they said no, virtual Ignite, and they said no, this is also not possible. But that's one of the scenarios we have to think about it. Okay. Go a little bit forward. I see in the time, and also I talked about a little bit about GDPR, and yes, GDPR is also possible and available for India, because when you are working with customers from Europe, like me or like Marcel or like other speaker from Europe in this very good conference, you will have to talk and you have to fulfill the GDPR requirements, and encryption is one of the main technical organizational measures. You see it here on the slide. You have pseudonymization, anonymization, and no use. Yeah, that's okay. And encryption. And encryption is mostly the main thing the companies choose, because with encryption you can work with sensitive information and sensitive personal information. For example, in e-heals, you need the name of the person, or you need the name of the person when you have some analytics. And for example, the people and I have this case 3 weeks before we talked about big data analytics in e-heals, and they said, okay, for the most of the analytics we need only the data, without any personal files. That's anonymization. That's okay. Sometimes we are using pseudonymization together with encryption. And yes, why we use it? Yes, that's sometimes. Not sometimes. That's very often that we have development in heals, for example, in cancer, so that people, they have cancer and it's 5 years, 6 years ago, and there is no method to help them, or no method, no medical to help them, that at the end there's a new development in heals, and there's a new medical service, or like this, a new method that they have, okay, their pseudonymization name, and we can bring it back to name and help the people after 5 years with the new method. So that's also a reason why we said, okay, put a little bit more encryption. We put it on also only on encrypted drives, encrypted transaction, encrypted SQL Server databases at the end to help the people and protect the data, on protected his or her data too. So that's very interesting. And that's a little bit also about thinking about GDPR. You have to encrypt the data, and if encrypted data, like in my example with the jail, the encrypted data will be lost. You don't have to inform everyone on the list, everyone or every person who's concerned in 72 hours. That's very interesting. That we have, when you encrypt something, you have some positive effects in GDPR. That is what you have to learn. So if you're working with customers in Europe, think about encryption. Okay. In time, you get all of these slides at the end. I go a little bit forward and think about a little bit about, okay, there's one in German, but that's not possible. We have to think about a little bit about protection of trade secrets and protection of secrets, how we can do it, how you can work with it. And every of you knows, okay, I talked about data classification, I talked about discovery. There are also accelerator workshops for the Microsoft partners here. They can use it and go to the customer, said, okay, we have to talk about encryption. We have to talk about at first discovery the files, and classify, then label, and as a part of sensitivity labeling, you have to talk about encryption. Or if you don't use the Microsoft Information Protection Framework, you can use, for example, the Norton ones, or the Rohde and Schwarz security gateways, or there are also from McAfee, has also some encryption technologies as a part of content security, and a lot of providers are worldwide with different restrictions and different options to encrypt and decrypt files. And for me, I love the most is Microsoft Information Protection, and together with Purview and together with all of the tools, I decrypt, encrypt, classify, label, and discover all of the files with auto labeling together. So this is a little bit the scheme we talked a little bit later. Okay, and if you take this, and if you decrypt and encrypt all of the files, and I talked in the introduction about what happened with the Cloud Act, what happened with FISA 702, 705, and with the US Department, and I think that's also very interesting for you. We talked about, okay, when national authorities from the US have access to files in India, has access to files in Europe, has access, or want to have access files in Germany, for example, in Ireland, in Dublin, or in India, and all of this. What happened when, for example, it's Microsoft, AWS, Salesforce, and all of this? So the mother of the company is in the USA, or the company is listed in NASDAQ. That's also very interesting. And I see 2 India companies also listed in Nasdaq, like SAP or Telecom. And if the company is listed in Nasdaq, it's also part of the Cloud Act and the Cloud Act impact. And if you have said, okay, what is with Encryption and Cloud Act? And that's very interesting. There's a paper. You see it here. You can Google or Bing, choose your search engine, what you want, and you can go. You see the paper from the Department of Justice. And when we have a deeper look to the paper of the Department of Justice, we see, okay, what happened in the agreement of Cloud Act. And the Cloud Act is encryption neutral. And this is very interesting. The same regulation we have in Germany in it called Telemediengesetz. Marcel, we know it. And in this law is also the agreement and the impact of getting access is also encrypted neutral. So if you have a deeper look to my animation works, the deeper look to the regulation in compaction with Cloud Act, and you see it here. The Cloud Act requires that exclusive agreement be encryption neutral, either requirement decrypt or for closing government from ordering decryption to the extent authorized by their laws. So one argument for more encryption. So out of a Cloud Act view, that's encryption neutral. So you can encrypt, and yes, we have the MIT study in the background. They only need 8 hours to decrypt, but all of the regulations in Europe and regulations, and also a lot of companies in Europe, and also MyCam said, okay, yeah, we use encryption to prevent, and then when there's an access about the Cloud Act, we don't need to give the key outside and give the key to, for example, to the NSA. They have to be care of it for their own and have to decrypt for their own. So that's very interesting when you talked about have a view at Cloud Act and access of files. Okay, go forward in time. I have some minutes more. We're talking about a little bit more about encryption, and I show you we talk about a little bit to the comparing slide. Switching to the comparing slide and have a look a little bit about encryption and encryption in the different clouds. And yes, that's possible that you have technologies, for example, in Microsoft 365 in the background of Azure, you bring encryption technologies like double key encryption, like Microsoft Information Protection, you can use as a software as a service part with RMS. RMS is the encryption part of it, and use the encryption out of the cloud. And also, that's very cool. You can bring your own keys in the clouds. And when you have a comparing slide like this, and you said, okay, I have very, very high sensitive information, and I want to have, and this is an example of a scenario, and I want to have my own keys, and I want to bring my own keys to storage. That's possible in every cloud, in every of these 3 clouds. Then, for example, I have platform as a service and software as a service. And only one cloud provider is also possible to bring your own keys to software as a service. Fully your own PKI structure, your only PKI and encryption infrastructure, and connect it to the cloud and bring and hold your own keys. But you can use with very small, limited everything of the cloud thing. And this is, and you see it in the slide, Google. That's Google. So Google is when you have a hold your own key scenario, also with big data and all of this, is the main provider today. But I know Azure will have a solution in the next months. I'm talking with a product group that we see hopefully in the next year also a hold your own key scenario also for software as a service in Azure. The only scenario we have today is double key encryption, but it don't work with Azure Purview and all of this. So a really hold your own key scenario we will see because there's a development in Azure Key Vault. So we will see hopefully more and more news about Azure Key Vault in the next years. Hopefully we will see, but today, for example, we are using Google with your hold your own key scenarios, also with software as a service, like SQL Server as a service. at Google. So in the Google Cloud, it's possible. So if you think of the other scenarios, AWS, Google, and Azure is relative comparing, and yeah, also only the names often changes, but it's also very comparing to use encryption in this cloud. But the primary one which has the most option to use keys and hold your own key scenario is Google Cloud today. If you have a deeper look a little bit to Office 365, you see it here, Microsoft 365. That's also a question I got every time. I get very often that we are talking about. Okay, Raphael, can you talk a little bit about the level of encryption in these in Microsoft 365? And when we have a look, and this is only a draft or only a short view of it, we have to think, and for example, we have a look at SharePoint Online as a software as a service software, and we have a look, okay, we have at rest, BitLocker. There's no hold your own key, there's no bring your own key. Okay, we have BitLocker. And then we have a look more, and I think I take a laser pointer. For example, we have scenario of SharePoint. We have at rest with BitLocker. Okay, this is Microsoft. Microsoft take care about it. Then we have application level and application. We have the default key, and yes, that's possible and called customer key solution. We can bring your own keys. We need two separate Azure subscription. We need two separate premium Azure keywords, and we need our keys, and then we can bring our keys with a PowerShell script. Before it was a ticket for premium support, and now where you have a PowerShell script and bring your own keys to SharePoint Online. And on it, we have also in SharePoint Online, this is a little bit special, that's why I choose it. We have the Fort Knox principle. So when you upload files to SharePoint, it will be cut it in a lot of pieces from 64 bits. And all of the pieces has a key, and you have the main key, and only when you have the pieces, the key of the pieces and the main key, it can be decrypted. So then when someone breaking in or get a part of this piece of the file, he can't open it, and or she can't open it, and the burglar can open it. But on the other side, this principle is a default one. You can't delete it or deactivate it, and you can't bring your own keys for it. So this is also a level above the application. And then on the other side, you have the file level and email level. And for SharePoint, you have the file level. And yes, that's bring your own key possible, and it's supported. Hold your own key, not anymore. It was a ADRMS solution. Microsoft said, okay, we cut and delete this solution in this year, and only DKA double key encryption is possible. So bring your own key and double key is possible in the Microsoft universe. Hold your own key is possible also. If we go a little bit away from SharePoint, is also for Azure storage. That's hold your own key solution is possible with, for example, managed service by Thales or by Entrust and all of this. So that's very interesting what's possible with SharePoint. And yes, if you shared a file via Exchange, via SharePoint, there's TLS default, and yes, with your email you can use also S-MIME and PGP in transit. And yeah, that's totally cool that you have combinations of encryptions and level of encryption, all of the tools you are using in the cloud and with the cloud. If you have a little bit look, and yes, I'm working also with Thales, with Entrust, and all of these providers together, and I get some slides from Thales I can also share. And that's very interesting when you have a look at the transcription options. And these provider hosting, and that's why I choose Thales, hosting the HSM, the high secure model. This is this one, and this is this piece of hardware. And why I choose the Thales one, I can also choose the Entrust one, but I found at first the one from Thales, because yeah, Google, AWS, and also Azure is using the hardware module from Thales for their keys for the Azure keyboard. So at the end, at the back end, mostly it's Thales and Entrust. So yes, you're using, and you can use these hardware also for your data center. That's the same one. That's this big three hardware provider. They are delivering high secure model or delivering these stores for keys. for all of the key scenarios, and that's very interesting when you have a look. Okay, you have different key scenarios around and encryption from the cloud and into the cloud, and we have also different methods. And you can use, for example, the Thales one or the Entrust one as your own PKI provider, so as your own key provider. And when we got a little bit forward and we said, okay, when you have your own key provider like the Thales module in your data center, or you take the managed service of Thales, that's also possible, like managed service of Entrust or managed service of other encryption provider. I don't know if there is a special one in India. If you have some, put it in the chat. But this is very interesting when we talked about the Thales offerings here. You can use your HSM model for different clouds and also for your local one. And in part of the time, I bring with you the headline is crashing a little bit, the design, but it's okay. That's very interesting, and that is the second part of my session. We can do it next year, or we can do it in the next conference. We're talking about the key life cycle. That's very interesting. For example, if you use here the Thales module or Entrust or everything, you have the typical key life cycle, also the key life cycle in the Azure Key Vault. If you have a look at the Azure Key Vault, yes, you need one Azure Key Vault. There's a question I got in the life cycle part, how much Azure Key Vaults you need. And yes, you need one Key Vault for one application. You can do everything in the same Key Vault, but from the access management, it's better you have one Key Vault for one application, or different Key Vaults for different applications and different scenarios. So in this key life cycle, you said, okay, we have this life cycle, and often the life cycle, sometimes the life cycle don't works. Only one example, and then we can have a deep dive in the next conference. For example, with Microsoft Information Protection, you bring your own key with you, and the key will be destroyed, for example, or will be revoked, and you want to restore the key. And you see here, cloud restore the key. The key will be restored, but the key out of a protection scenario get a new ID. And the system said, okay, it's a new key. I can't restore a key, and now we have to decrypt with a super admin everything of the files and encrypt it one more time with the old key, which is the new key for the system. And yeah, that's very interesting. But these are the scenarios we have to think about. What happened with your key? What happened with your key in the different scenarios? And when you have a look here, okay, I have to translate also one small sentence, but if you have a look at the different scenarios, default or standard, create your own key is not supported in Azure. It's supported in Google too. That's cool. And also bring your own key, hold your own key, and double key encryption. The most of the companies is using what? The most of the companies using the default one. Because the provider like Microsoft or also AWS or Google Cloud take care of it, take care of the life cycle, take care of restoring, and all of this you only use. So it's a typical, software as a service solution for keys or for the whole key infrastructure. And then I see more and more bring your own key, because a lot of lawyers said, okay, you need to bring your own key, because bring your own key helps you against, for example, US authorities or the access of US authorities. Yes, that's okay. Bring your own key is okay, but out of my perspective, bring your own key with a rotation key. That's better. So you bring your key to the cloud and put it, for example, in the Azure Key Vault, but at the end you make a rotation every week. So, for example, the key rotation is a better protection against, for example, also US authorities. But at the end, hold your own key is the best scenario here, but it's also the with the most effort, the most costs, and all of this, and the most risk, because you have to be care of your own key environment, your own key infrastructure. Yes, you can, but you can go and bring it outside. But is it really hold your own key? Yes, you pay for someone like Thales, Entrust, or this, that they handle your key infrastructure. and connecting your key infrastructure with Microsoft, and then you have to think about, okay, is it a strategic good idea to use the same provider like the Microsoft provider, so like the cloud data center provider, so for example Entrust and Thales? Yes, it can be a good idea, but also, yeah, is it like the same like you using the Azure keyboard? So that's a strategic discussion, you have to think about it. And the Microsoft one is the Microsoft new one we only find in the Azure environment is double key encryption, one key, and I skip here and go to this. Where is my slide here? Yeah, what means double key encryption? Double key encryption is Microsoft has one key and you have one key. And when you have a look here, the key of you is stored in the Thales environment, and these scenarios are a lot of more. So we have this stored here. You have the key broker, which is connected to the Microsoft Information Protection world, to the Microsoft Information Protection client. And then in the cloud is also Azure RMS at the end. So it's the next level of hold your own key scenario. Microsoft has a key and you have the key. And when you have a decrypt or an encrypt scenario, the encrypt scenario is including also the metadata, and the key is also stored, or doesn't it stored, is key information is also in the metadata, not the key information that you can decrypt it, but the information that there is a double key encryption scenario, or that you use double key encryption, you see it in the metadata. But here you see it, the content is encrypted with the customer key control. It's encrypted with the Microsoft key control. So both keys together can decrypt, and both keys together can encrypt. And we have also the encrypt scenario here, but this has some limits and some restrictions. And then, yeah, at the end, I'm at the end of the session, but talking a little bit about the restrictions. Double key encryption and decryption is only possible on Windows devices. It's only possible with a Microsoft Information Protection client, so no native model. What's not possible, also not possible, is to use it on apps on your phones. It's not possible with double key encryption. You can't use it on mobile, you can't use it on Mac. It's not possible. You can use it on Linux. It's not possible. It's only the scenario Windows device, used Microsoft Information or Unified Labeling client, and you can't use this with really external guys or external people. The external ones need an account in your environment and need to access, because they need to be also accessed to your PKE structure, to your HMS model here, and they need access to, so no external users, so no external user devices, and DK is not possible with PureView, so it's only a very limited scenarios for, and we talked a lot of with Microsoft, a lot of customers. We talked, okay, this is now for 3% of your data of your company. But more and more companies, they have DKE, they roll back to bring your own key or roll back to default key, because it's not the daily scenario, and it don't works with the daily scenario of using keys. The same with the encryption gateways, and I have also a slide of the encryption gateways. Where is the slide here? Encryption gateway options. If you have a gateway, Rodo and Schwarz gateway, there are some gateways from Germany. They encrypt and decrypt the files when they go to the cloud and come back to the cloud. They have also a lot of restriction, like the search. The search don't works. That's the same for DKE. The search don't works for these files. Iperi is working for a search engine only for encrypted files with this default gateway. But for me, it's not really good working today. But there's also very, very interesting information when you encrypt and working with Microsoft Information Protection, and you encrypt and decrypt files, and you're working this with labels. Have you look at the connected services? Some one of you, hopefully, when you working with an encrypt file, the connected experiences don't work. For example, no translation for encrypted files. So also the Microsoft encrypted or Microsoft connected services don't work. So that's also a good option to make a granular configuration when you have a high sensitive file, and the high sensitive file or high confidential file is encrypted. The connected experience and also the content connected experience like transcription don't work. At the end, 2 slides. A little bit about the framework of encryption. You see here Defender for Cloud. We have DLP together and Azure PureView and Threat Protection or Defender for Office 365. And on the other side, we have the Microsoft framework, and the encryption ones is always the right management system. Today, it called Microsoft Information Protection, or it called Unified Labeling. We have some steps between, but all of these scenario out of the Microsoft view is a Microsoft scenario, and the best one is to put it together with Intune, DLP, Defender for Cloud apps, and using the unified labeling system and put it together. For me, that's the best scenario to work with encrypted files every day. So at the end, I say thank you. We talked about DKE, we talked about different clouds and options in the clouds. We are talking also a little bit about what are the restrictions for DKE, and I have a slide also, restriction about DKE and what is working, what's not working, how it works, talking a little bit about how it works. You get the slides and you can have a view at the slides too. And so at the end, we have some questions before I start with the next, with my next session. We have some minutes between, and now I have also a look to the slides. Okay. I'm at the end. I'm talking a little bit more. I think I can talk. But if there are any questions, I can answer the question. And at the end, and yes, I'm also one of these geeks, I say thank you. And hopefully you can a little bit Klingon, then you can read also the end, the last one. And this is not an encryption, but this is also a cloud service for translation to translate out of the cloud things. So you know this slide is not encrypted because it's public. Any questions? And yes, we can make a deep dive. That's a question I got everything. Yes, we can make a deep dive as a customer scenario, community session or like this with encryption and more details on DKE and all of this. And also, I have a good connection to the Microsoft guys of DKE. We can bring it and talk with them. Okay. I'm ready.
All right, I think we're good. Thank you so much, Raphael, for the wonderful session. I think this was really great. And I see there is just one question in the Q&A. If you can help us in answering that in the chat. But yeah, I think this was really good. Thank you so much, Ryan.